I get thousands of questions.
How we could nurture this kind of innovative skill for kids.
So they have this special connection.
Classroom teachers are building lessons on solar energy.
It is quite popular in Kazakhstan.
You have to be careful about studying about this.
The Ministry of Education say, just change that.
So it's really changing the culture of how teachers learn.
What are you doing there? We have never heard about that.
I have not learned yet. Tell me what to do.
What is happening in the United States?
What are we doing, throughout the school to build that?
How the teaching is influencing the learning.
They know that the teacher's going to ask about their ideas.
All right, so welcome to Center of Excellence podcast. It's a great honor to host these three distinguished leaders in education, and thank you so much for finding time in your tight schedule and joining us today. So today in our podcast we have Kэtrin Lewis, President of World Association of Lesson Study. She is a distinguished science researcher at Mills College, California, United States of America. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Next, we are joined by Stefan Cliva. He's a President-elect of World Association of Lesson Study and a specialist in math and science, or just math.
Math education.
Just math education at Lausanne University.
Of teacher education.
Of teacher education, yes, thank you. And finally, we have Akihiko Takahashi, the Honorable General Secretary of World Association of Lesson Study and a leading figure at College of Education at DePaul University, United States of America. So thanks again for coming, and we're very excited about our upcoming conference, and we hope that this podcast will contribute to the general knowledge of lesson study for educators in Kazakhstan and maybe worldwide. So let's dive right in. My first question for you will be, if it is possible, could you briefly describe your personal experience with lesson study? How did you first find out about it, and how come that for so many years you are thrilled about this idea, you're driven by this idea, and you still are with lesson study? If possible, briefly. I understand that you have too much experience there. Yeah, Kэtrin, maybe you will start if you want.
Well, in the 1990s, I was sitting in Japanese classrooms for many months, and I was actually studying social development and how children learn to lead the classroom. But without any intention, I discovered I was learning a lot of mathematics and science. And this was very strange. I already had a PhD, yet by sitting in first and second grade classrooms, I was learning so much mathematics and science. And I thought, this is very strange. And so I asked the teachers, how did you learn to teach this way? And their answer was very surprising. They said, oh, some of these teaching techniques came from the United States. Well, in the United States, I've never seen such magnificent math and science lessons. So I said, well, how did you personally learn to teach this way? And they said, lesson study, lesson study. So I said, show me lesson study. And that was about 30 years ago, and I've never stopped studying lesson study since.
And why is that? So just because you love the idea?
Well,
you believe in this idea, or what?
Yes, well, I come from a family, 3 generations of school teachers, and I think that in general, in the United States, our systems of professional learning don't honor the large knowledge that teachers bring to education and the power of teachers carefully observing students. And so lesson study is a system for teachers' knowledge to become something that they can share with their colleagues and that can shape the curriculum and shape education.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Stefan, how about you?
I think you should start with Akihiko, because my answer will be related to him. So
really?
And
okay. So is it true that Japanese are born with the knowledge about lesson study, or do you have to learn about it?
Well, yeah, actually, I was a teacher in Japan, and when I first experienced lesson study, kind of beginning of lesson study is my student teacher year, which is more than 45 years ago.
Wow.
So I'm doing lesson study for 45 years, more than 45 years. And that time, the Japanese mathematics education, I was educated as a mathematics teacher. And then I have a license for elementary school, middle school, high school. And then I was an elementary school teacher and focusing mathematics. And that time, the Japan has a huge movement shifting, from teaching by telling to teaching through problem solving, which is the Catherine talk about it. Kind of that time in the United States and then around the world, people talking about how we could nurture students to become a problem solver. So more like authentic, kind of, like they spend time in solving problem and then how we could nurture this kind of, innovative skill for kids. And then we work together as a teacher and we work together with researchers to make this happen. And then I was fortunate that time, it's the middle of the transition. And then through the lesson study. And then I came to United States to, for having, the PhD. And then that time I tried to learn more about teaching through problem solving, which is a lot of research or document available in the United States that time. And then I came to United States and then go to the school, and nobody knows this. And there's a huge gap between research and then practice. And then that time we realized, the US teacher doesn't have a lesson study. The lesson study is a mechanism to make this research idea into classroom. So, and then that time I met with Catherine, and then she encouraged me to kind of stay, because that time there's not many Japanese educators who had a first-hand experience of lesson study is in the United States. And so therefore I think, I may stay a little bit. And then I end up 25 years in the United States. But fortunately, back and forth with Japan and US and then other countries, and then do lesson study. So lesson study is kind of, my entire teaching career.
So when you first met Catherine, she already caught the virus of lesson studies.
Yes.
She was in the team. All right. So how about you, Stefan?
Yeah, it's a question of virus. I had heard about lesson study. I'm very young with lesson study, and I've been to Singapore in 2012, meeting with Christine Lee, and Akihiko Takahashi happened to be there. And I saw my first live research lesson and comment by the teachers, but also by Christine Lee and by Akihiko. And as you said, it's wonderful lessons that I would love to see in Switzerland, and I was not seeing that. So since then, I've been working with teachers who, and your question was also why to continue, who are enthusiastic when they practice lesson study, and saying that it gives them kind of a magic power to observe their students, and also to really speak about teaching and learning, and not about the teacher. When you observe a lesson, you really dig deep into the lesson. So that's a reason I would continue, but there is another secret reason, and since nobody is listening, I can tell you, it's meeting people. It's meeting people who are researchers, who are teacher educators, who are school administrators, who are also students, and not only in my country, in my place, where lesson study is very local, but meeting other local lesson studies, like we do every year with the WALS conference. It was in Malaysia, it was in Singapore, but also in Sweden or United Kingdom, and this year in Kazakhstan. It's just fabulous to work with these people closely at a very local level, but other local level meeting people.
Okay.
I love it.
All right, thank you. So you are the youngest from these.
You mean for lesson study, yes.
Out of these three. All right, I have a personal question. So all three of you are mathematicians, and what does lesson study has to do with the mathematics? Why so many math teachers take part in lesson study? Is it because math teachers are more into research, or mathematic lessons are more measurable? So what is it there? Like in Kazakhstan, we have a very opposite situation. Very little mathematics teachers take part in lesson study. I think you will notice during our conference that there are like teachers of languages and history and chemistry, physical education, just name it, and very few math teachers. But worldwide, I noticed that there are very many math teachers rather than other subjects. So what is it with math and lesson study?
You know, I think that's kind of an accident of history. Lesson study became known to the English-speaking world through the book The Teaching Gap, where they were looking... So
it's your responsibility.
Well, I had actually written about lesson study before that, but it didn't get the same worldwide attention.
Okay.
When it was linked with the TIMSS, the Third International Math and Science Study, it made it clear how Japan's very high achievement in mathematics was due to lesson study. But actually in Japan, lesson study is more common, even more common in language arts than it is in math. So it's not in any way related to mathematics. It's useful for any subject in deepening your capacity to observe students and your joint study with your colleagues of the curriculum.
Yeah, I'm sure of that, but it just the fact is that all three of you, for example, are from math. We have math background. Do you have a? Okay.
Actually, my background is not in mathematics.
You're not.
But in the United States, I think mathematics is very poorly taught. You know, we're fairly low in worldwide achievement, and we have magnificent goals for reforming mathematics that we've had for 40 years, but classroom instruction doesn't change. So it provides finally a key to change classroom instruction in the very difficult field of mathematics.
Okay, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, the mathematics is kind of universally, we have a same shared goal. It doesn't matter which country you go. Like, you know, the mathematics, like a pretty much same curriculum and same contents, same expectation, and then the same kind of renovation, you know, that we need. However, it's not easy to change it, because many people, like, you know, probably you are math teachers, knowing mathematics is enough to teach kids. And then if students cannot do the math well, that's their fault, not our fault. That's a kind of typical belief.
Yes.
However, and the lesson study provide opportunity for teachers. The teacher's job is not to passing knowledge to the student. We actually need students to learn by themselves. So it's a big shift. So as Stefan said, once you carefully looking at how students doing mathematics, that's totally changing. But unfortunately, many teachers do not have such kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
I taught this one. I cover this textbook. And then my students are lazy, therefore they cannot do this. But lesson study give you opportunity to shift it. And then same expectation, same goal, you know, is really different viewpoint. So that's the reason why the many people in other than, you know, Japan doing lesson study in mathematics and science.
Okay. I wish lesson study was more popular in Kazakhstan like 30 years ago when I was at school, because like math teachers were the scariest in the entire school, and I didn't get it, and it was very, very stressful for me. But okay, so I see your perspective. So how about you?
About the same answer. I mean, we have many math educators active in the lesson study community. That's accident of history maybe, but yeah, of course, also the fact that when we go to another country, look at a lesson, it's often easier to look at a math lesson and understand it than to look at a local language lesson, which we might not understand. But we are fighting so that people don't think that lesson study is only for math. It is not. It's for every subject. And if you look at the learning of the student and the teaching and how the teaching is influencing the learning, what element in teaching, if you change a little bit, how does it influence the learning, can be seen for every subject, math, but also physical education or social studies or language, of course.
Yeah. All
And
right.
I think World Association of Lesson Study is really working hard to build special interest groups in areas other than mathematics, and we're hoping in future conferences to have lessons that are not just in mathematics but in other subject areas. So maybe Kazakhstan teachers can take a lead in this if there are many.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You are in the right place, because if you see the school visits, so we have none, no math classes there at all. Everything possible, but not mathematics. All right, so that's great. So I got the answer. Thank you very much. So thinking about the mission, yes, something that Kэtrин has already started, of World Association of Lesson Study. So how do you see the mission will develop within the year? So what role do you think it will play in education in 10 years or 15 years from now? Who has the answer? Maybe your thoughts.
The community has the answer, and that's one of the role of this conference, as any conference, for every people attending, but even more from the people in the association council or executive committee, to bring ideas to how to develop and to connect people. Because as I said earlier, from my personal experience, lesson study is very local. And it's extremely powerful at a local level. But it's even more powerful if you put these local levels in a network. And that's what this Association of Lesson Study is. So I would say the main goal would be to connect people even more, so that they can learn from each other communities in doing lesson studies. Not only knowing that, they are doing it this way, or they are teaching social studies this way in this country, but all what it says about the way we are teaching in our place, it's different. Why so? How can we compare that? So probably that's one of the goals, and we need to develop that, especially now that we have even more ways to communicate worldwide than what it was at the beginning of the association. And we have to develop that part too, to connect people with all the possibilities we have now, to have also online meetings, research lesson maybe sometimes being shared around the world. So we will develop all these points, I guess, hopefully.
Okay.
Yes, I think that there are many ways that lesson study can improve practice around the world if we're able to see each other's ways of doing lesson study and each other's actual lessons. And it's very easy to assume that whatever happens in your own culture is the way it has to be. And I think for those of us who've had the opportunity to dip into classrooms in other cultures or to dip into lesson study in other cultures, we realize our work could be completely different. So take one example. In Japan, when they change the national curriculum, they give a lot of grants to local schools to build knowledge in advance of that change about how to teach the subject matter. So I happened to be in Japan when solar energy was being introduced to the national curriculum. So all over Japan, teachers, classroom teachers, are building lessons on solar energy and doing large public lessons. Maybe 1,000 people come to see them. And they can ask lots of questions. Well, how do scientists think about solar energy? And the ideas that the children came up with, like put 2 lamps on a solar cell or move a light closer to a solar cell, are those the same thing in scientists' views? So teachers can build their own knowledge of the science of solar energy. And that's a kind of opportunity that doesn't exist for teachers in the United States and probably around the world. So we can learn about these other forms of lesson study and how it can be used to bring teachers' voices to influence the national curriculum.
When the lesson study was introduced to the worldwide outside of Japan, Japanese educators, even researchers, do not know much about lesson study. It's kind of irony, but because they've been doing for more than 100 years.
Yes.
And then they knew it works. But why it works, what is the challenge, what is the mechanism, those study was not done carefully. And then even like individual teachers who have the experience of doing lesson study in Japan, but they do not know that the meta level of the view of the lesson study, which part is important, why it works, why what under circumstance it doesn't work. Those study was not. And then the World Association Lesson Study, that was like a 2000, early 2000 year, and they started, and then many researchers start talking about this one. But yet, still, it's very difficult to unpack why it works and why it doesn't work.
Yes.
And as a result, many countries, many researchers, many teachers, many schools try to lesson study, but it seems not working very well. Some places working very well. The mechanism was not clear yet. So there are a lot of room for research. And at the same time, we need to help more, we need more teachers to experience in lesson study. The one of the critical aspect of lesson study is teachers should take an initiative for their own professional development. Some researchers said, this is like a lesson study is a tool for decentralization of professional development. So professional development is kind of always top-down.
Yes.
At the beginning, it's top-down. Like we are going to aim to this innovative approach or this new goal, like solar powers. However, next stage, the teacher should take an initiative. I want to try this. We want to try this. Rather than you have to do this, do that.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult for many countries. So in order to do so, researchers need to unpack the mechanism of lesson study. At the same time, we want to have more teachers take an initiative. I want to try this way. I want to try that way. To try new idea through lesson study and work together, the researchers and teachers. So that's the kind of agenda for last 20 years of World Association Lesson Study. But we still on the way.
Yeah.
And of course other subject area too.
Yeah. So Akihiko, I have a question for you. So you are the most experienced one, like 45 years in lesson study. So within this 45 years, has it always been like this, what you mentioned, like the researchers and teachers working together, decentralization of professional development? Or do you see the transition, the transformation, something is happening like within these 45 years?
Well, actually, year 2000 and 2001, we have a US-Japan the research seminar in the mathematics education. All the top mathematics education researchers in the United States, other countries, we have several meetings. That time, we couldn't define what lesson study is. And then, I also did a study with Japanese teachers, and then more interviewing, case study, and then try for me to understand lesson study, why it works, why it not. So my view of lesson study become more like of course I did as a classroom teachers and then national level working together for 20 years, but come to United States as a researchers, I start understanding more and then how it works. And then the Catherine, we work together to do a lot of research project. She invited me to join and work together to unpack all this, why it works, why it doesn't work. And then now we start seeing some successful cases in United States, and then it's really, really impactful. So we just started. But my view of the lesson study is more like after 20 years, on top of my 20 years first-hand experience, it's more crystallizing. And then now I can help more teachers and to do lesson study in an impactful way.
That's actually very interesting what you just said, because as Catherine, you're saying it's an obvious idea, a very easy idea, just look attentively at the students and that is it. But why is it still kind of so difficult to unpack, to understand, to feel this mechanism, to make sure that it works? I get thousands of questions from the teachers every day, like, do we do it right? Do we do it right? Do we do it wrong? They write an article and they're not sure that this is a good article or the good enough research. So why is it so difficult to understand for teachers? What do you think, Catherine or Stefan?
Well, I think it's a simple idea, but it's a very challenging practice. Because I'd like to hear Stefan's ideas about Switzerland, but in the United States, it requires us to change the culture of schools. And changing culture, I mean, human beings create culture, human beings can change culture. But we really need to change the culture of the schools. So when people do lesson study, I hear them say things like, oh, I used to hide my mistakes. But now if I have a mistake in my practice, I go ask my colleagues, you know, what could I do about this situation?
Yeah.
Or I used to think of my students as my students and I want them to do better than the rest of the students in the class. But now I realize it's our students and I want all the students in the whole school to do well. And we need to talk, fifth grade and kindergarten teachers need to talk if we want all the students to do well. So it's changing those elements of culture that interfere with the best learning for children. And likewise, American teachers are used to studying the curriculum maybe the day before they teach a lesson. And with lesson study, we're studying the curriculum together with colleagues, maybe months before we teach a unit, to go very deep into, you know, what's the content and how are students going to understand that content and what are the misconceptions that we expect and how are we going to help students deal with those. So it's really changing the culture of how teachers learn at a school and the culture of human relationships as well.
Okay, agree totally. It takes time to change culture, and what I've noticed that the teachers, when they start lesson study, I don't know, in Kazakhstan I hear that a lot, they usually take the class, like maybe let's take this is the weakest class and they have a lot of issues, and then after a year they say, we should have taken another one. These are really good students. These are really good kids. And I understand that happens because they look so attentively to them. They spend so much time like thinking about how they think, how they learn. So they have this special connection to the students, and this is a very like changing their mind as well. All right, Stefan, do you have anything to add to this?
It's complicated because it's complicated.
Yes.
I mean, learning and teaching and the effect of teaching choice on learning, it's something very complicated. It's very complicated for researchers. But with lesson study, teachers are doing that on their own teaching. Why? Because quite often when researchers say, oh, just do that, I mean, they come with conclusion after the research and we change the curriculum, just teach this way. It doesn't work that well. In countries where the Ministry of Education say, just change that. Then you go to the class 2 years later, it didn't change. So what lesson study is doing is really to study the learning and the teaching with the teachers. So it is a extremely complicated thing, this relationship between teaching and learning. That's why doing it with teacher is powerful, but it's also extremely complicated. It's also extremely complicated for teachers and for every one of us to think about the teaching from the learner's point of view. It's not just me teaching, but what are my students learning? My teaching is not important. What is important is what my students are learning. And that requires a change of culture, but for everybody. to change that, because as teacher, what we tend to do is prepare our lesson. We prepare what we are teaching. With lesson study, we prepare what students are learning. And therefore, thinking kind of backwards, how should I teach so that they learn this way? And we do that in a collaborative way, which also means it's more powerful, but more complicated. It's easy to change no, it's not easy, but it might be easy to change for me, but it's not just me, it's my colleagues, and we are moving together. It's more powerful, but not easier.
And sometimes you may think that you changed, but when you are in the team, there is no way you can lie about what you learned and how much you've changed. Yes. All right. So that's a very interesting conversation. Thank you for your ideas. Let's talk about the Switzerland case. And Stefan, you mentioned that it's very local but very powerful. So what do you think? Is it really important to go wide, like globally, like the whole country-wise, or rather concentrate on a local but really good practice? So how important it is to, to widen the borders all the time?
So for our case in Switzerland, it's still very local, and we are struggling to make it stronger at the local level to maybe go more global. So in my opinion, it's important to start local. In our school system and school culture, it might be different in other countries, but for our system, it's important to start local, but it takes a lot of time to go from a little group of teachers, maybe from different school, to go one school really doing lesson study, and hopefully later continue to do that. And one of the example we are looking at, by the way, we cannot look at Japan for that. We can look at Japan for what is lesson study, what type of lesson they are building, what's the relationship with the curriculum, but we cannot look at Japan for the development of lesson study, because lesson study is like in the air. But a quite interesting example is what is happening in the United States, where they are further, because you started earlier. That's one of the reasons. And I think you have very interesting example, Akihiko and Kathleen, about that.
Yeah.
Well, Akihiko and I have discovered the power of school-wide lesson study. That goes way beyond just individual groups of teachers. When, as a whole school, you say, what are the qualities we want students to have when they graduate from our school? And how are we building those qualities now? Like if we want them to be deep thinkers and really enjoy their learning and really be able to confidently present their ideas and argue about them, what are we doing, throughout the school to build that? And when you begin to work at a whole school with the same research theme, but each grade level brings to life a lesson, brings to life that research theme in a lesson, then you start seeing a tremendous power across the school because everybody's on the same page. And for example, when students are in a mathematics class, they know that the teacher's going to ask about their ideas and that the whole class is going to discuss their ideas. You don't go from grade 1, you're doing your own individual work, to grade 2, your ideas are expected, to grade 3, your ideas aren't important at all. As a whole school, you're building that capacity for students to express their ideas and other students to agree or disagree and prove why they think the idea is wrong or right. So that kind of power of school-wide lesson study, we've seen in the United States, it's dramatically improved students' standardized test scores, including students from historically marginalized groups by race, income, second language status, groups for which in most settings in the US there's a huge achievement gap for those children. But in the sites doing school-wide lesson study, those children look just like the dominant ethnic group, dominant, richer children. So it's really been a powerful strategy. Nothing else has approached that.
Interesting. Okay, so in Japan, lesson studies in the air, right? So we don't discuss your case. Interestingly, what Catherine just mentioned, so the first thing you were thinking is what qualities the graduate of the school should have, right? So that's how you built the ideas of lesson study. So now education faces a lot of challenges, not only education, like the entire world, and it's not only pandemics, wars, human rights, so many different issues and challenges. So how do you think lesson study answers these challenges? Do you think it could be the tool to help educators to overcome, to help the students to become better people in future?
Well, this is not necessarily lesson study, but the lesson study help teachers realize critical aspect of teaching and learning, which is not necessarily mathematics. We've been talking about why student we need to look at this. Every subject, teacher, and then the contents, and then students, these are kind of three critical aspects to make a classroom. Everybody knew it. However, people do not, think seriously about how the student impact to the lesson. In fact, many people say that if you have a good lesson plan, it works for all the classroom. When teacher asks, "Can I have a good lesson plan?" Yeah, this works for my class. You can use it. Unfortunately, there are not such thing available. Because if you think about it, my student, our student, this school student is different from other schools. So every single lesson should be customly made for the student in front of you. Right?
Yeah.
Even like a good textbook, it does not work for all the classroom.
Of course.
Because the textbook is a medium-sized jacket, you have to adjust to fit in your student.
Yeah.
But how you modify this one? Teacher do every time, every day, kind of intentionally or not intentionally. But they are not carefully looking at the impact of this modification or adjustment. Lesson study make it more explicit about. Like a teacher is, the textbook is using this one. I want to use this textbook in this way, and because that impact our student. That's a kind of lesson design, lesson hypothesis.
Yeah.
And then asking your colleague to see it. Oh, it works very well. Or maybe not, because you have such student. Those students are not listening carefully or something like that.
Yeah.
And then that knowledge is very important to kind of how you adjust medium-sized jacket to fit into your student.
Yeah.
But in order to do so, teacher has to be professional. Our project, with Japanese colleagues, we call it Impulse, International Math Teacher Professionalization Using Lesson Study.
Wow.
So that's the professionalization part is missing in many countries. So what do you mean by professional? I often use this kind of analogy using like a fast food restaurant workers and then owner chef of the restaurant. Fast food restaurant workers, if they think that this menu today is hot weather, so maybe we can a little bit more salt. If those workers do this, you're gonna be fired because they are not the professional. But the owner chef of the restaurant, they look at their customers and then adjust this one to see the meat, right? Even like the same menu can deliver differently. And we want the classroom teachers like that. Not like a fast food restaurant workers to just, I'm gonna teach this recipe every day. It doesn't matter what kind of people coming. So that's the difference between
It's amazing.
right? The professionalization.
Yeah.
How are we going to do this? Because you need more intentional decision to adjust your menu, like a curriculum, to fit into your student, and then you need to have a mechanism to see the impact.
Yeah.
That's lesson study.
Wow. Thank you so very much for this example. I'm going to use it so many times now. I don't think that anybody wants to be a professional in a fast food restaurant, but that's a really good one. Thank you. All right. Any addition to these ideas? Or
I might add to this comparison the fact that there's no such thing as a perfect lesson already made for every case, and there is no already made solution for global warming, climate change, wars, democracy, human rights. We need to be problem solvers. We need our students, when they will be in power places, to be problem solvers, and to be problem solvers in a collaborative way, and build new solutions by looking at the effect of what they are doing on the thing they want to problems they want to solve. And by entering in this culture for teachers and for the whole school system, teacher working with researcher, working with the students, working with the textbook authors, with the people who are making the course of study, like Lesson Study does in the countries where Lesson Study is really in the system. That's a way to produce problem solvers to solve collaboratively these problems. So no such thing as a perfect lesson, no such thing as a perfect solution for climate change, but we have to work collaboratively on that on a local level and on a more global level. And both are as important, and we need to talk together between countries. Like this conference we are going to have these days, working with people from Kazakhstan, from the US, from Japan, from Africa, it's important that we work together talking about what we are doing at our local level. So that's probably also one important aspect.
Well, why you need to work together? Because teaching is not easy.
yes,
It's a very difficult task. So therefore, fighting by yourself is too overwhelming. So the lesson study is like developing communities, professional communities. It's easy to say, but it's difficult. But we have to
Again,
do this.
easy but complicated.
Japanese teachers, when you ask them, why do you do lesson study, they often say, well, lesson study gives you the eyes to see children. For the first time, you can really see children through practicing lesson study. And I think developing the eyes to see children can happen in many ways. It can happen just from having the opportunity to carefully observe a child during a lesson. It can happen from having a knowledgeable outsider come and observe the lesson with you and notice things that you didn't notice. It can come from having high quality curriculum materials that elucidate what is a student going to think about this and what do we do if the student thinks that. It can come from hearing your colleagues' observations. It can come from seeing practice, on a video or live in another country around the world and realizing children are capable of things that you didn't realize in your culture. So I think all those experiences can contribute to building the eyes to see children.
Yeah, that's a nice one too. All right, I have another question. There is an idea, it's quite popular in Kazakhstan. Like you were saying, learning is very complicated, and it's not only about like cognitive skills. Yes, it includes your emotional state of mind, your social skills, how you may communicate, your motivation to studying, and some lesson studies are really concentrated on cognition, on how students learn. But others concentrate on, okay, let's create a nice environment, friendly atmosphere, like more on emotional or social aspect of learning. So what do you think about this? It is quite popular in Kazakhstan, and many teachers are not quite sure whether it is a good idea to research this part of learning. So what do you think about that?
I think both are essential, and one of the really interesting aspects of Japanese education is that I think many countries in the world have a kind of hydraulic change between they try to promote academic development, and then that undermines social development.
Yeah.
So they try to promote social development, and then that undermines academic development. And Japanese education is very serious about both. They build a strong community of learners among children, and they also build academic excellence.
Right.
And I think those go hand in hand. You know, if you want to do challenging instruction like teaching through problem solving, where students are coming up with their own solutions and discovering that some of them are wrong, you need to have a very strong classroom community where students see each other as allies in learning and supporters of each other's learning, not in competition with each other. So I think those things are both essential. You can build them both, but you need to really take care that you're not building, focusing on just one and not the other. And if you want to do that, really the only way to do it is to build children's intrinsic motivation. If you're mainly using competition and extrinsic rewards to motivate children, you're going to undermine their social relationships.
Yeah.
So that's a very tall order, but I think that to me is the other, besides lesson study, that's the really magnificent aspect of Japanese education, is that they take both social development and intellectual development very seriously.
Okay. Do
Well,
you agree?
you know, it's related to, you know, what Catherine said, but if the teacher want to become a professional, what do you mean by professional is not just randomly grabbing some of the interesting stuff to make a lesson.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have to be careful about studying about this one. Why you change this one? Why you use this one? Why you set up a classroom? Why you have like a group of 3 students work together? Why 4? Why not 5?
Yeah.
Those decisions teacher made every day, but every single decision should be more reasonable. There's some rationale, and then make it explicit. That's a lesson plan. So the lesson plan for lesson study is, you know, I stopped saying lesson plan because many people say the lesson plan is like a more like a one-page things.
Yeah.
And then I encourage people to say research lesson proposal. If we do this way, students learn better because research said. So it takes long time to do it, but we need to nurture teachers to develop such kind of skill to carefully study and then make a decision and a clear hypothesis to teach it. So it takes usually 6 to 8 weeks to prepare one lesson plan
Yeah.
because it's a research. The lesson study is a teacher research. And you know that we call lesson study, that's a Japanese translation.
Yeah.
And then Stigler and Hebert in the teaching gap, they use it. But the Catherine originally translated in, you know, like a lesson research. And then I really love to like a lesson research. That time, you know, like 20 years ago, I was not so, you know, aware of this impact. But because we use that term lesson study, so many misunderstandings coming.
Yeah.
But we should stay with the lesson research because that's a teacher research and the research aspect of lesson study. And then if you, the teacher, say, look at they by themselves by researchers, it's more like a professional. And that's the reason why, you know, we want teachers to be researchers, to make a decision and then test their hypothesis with colleagues to collecting data in the live classroom and then have some discussion. So.
Okay, so we'll go back to this idea
Okay.
after Stefan's remarks.
No, just to highlight this fact that the cognitive aspect and the more affective aspect go hand in hand in lesson study. And it's always about the effect of teaching on learning, but the emotional aspect is part of learning,
Yeah.
of course. And really being aware of the decision we are taking as teachers when preparing the lesson, and of course also during the lesson, they have effects on the students' emotions and on their learning. And that's what we study when we do research lesson, when we do lesson study.
Yeah.
And we study that so that we become more aware of this decision we are taking and the effect they have, so that we improve the whole teaching and learning process, including the affective aspect. I would not advocate to focus only on one, to focus only on the emotional aspect, because school is about learning, and emotional aspect is part of the learning. So, in my opinion, they should go hand in hand.
Okay. About lesson research, how important do you think it is when a lesson study group is supervised by a researcher from university? Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but the fact is that in Kazakhstan we have a lot of lesson study groups and who do not have any connection with any university or college professors who help them on their way. And we have this feeling that sometimes they get lost in research because it's a totally different type of things that they are not used to doing. So how important it is, and if they don't have this university professor who is working hand in hand with them in this process, is it a big problem?
Well, it's not necessary to asking, university professors directly, but it's very important. You have to study their curriculum material carefully. So, not just like a day before to read it, but if you have any textbook and why these tasks are lined up in this particular order, and then how this unit was designed, and why this particular unit or section have like so many hours of instruction to accomplish this particular expectation or objective of the lessons. That studies, and then looking at your student, like a teaching guide, if you carefully read it, something, I don't understand this part. And then you could ask some of your references, or like your college professor from your undergraduate, or some of the professional development, or Center of Excellence people to kind of grab and then ask this question. But at the beginning, not necessary to tell me what to do is not a good idea. Study their material carefully and then coming up a question. That's a kind of, same thing we expect student, right? Not just students say, I have not learned yet, tell me what to do, is not a good student. Same thing with teachers. We want teachers to study, so.
And not just your own materials, but in Japan, the teacher's edition of the textbook includes a lot of information about the development of student thinking and the kinds of misunderstandings that students typically develop, and a lot of alternative ways of anticipating student thinking. U.S. teacher's edition might not include so much of that. So if that's the case, to find, what's some knowledge out there, either in research articles or in video from other countries' instructions, or you can find that in lots of places. It doesn't need to be a researcher. And I just want to second what Akihiko said, that sometimes not having a researcher lead the group can enable teachers to develop more autonomy and investment and sense of agency, and that can actually be more beneficial.
Okay. So that it could be beneficial because I don't know, I don't have so much experience in WALS conferences. My first was in 2014 in Indonesia. But I think this conference in Kazakhstan is going to be unique in a way that there will be more than 400 participants from Kazakhstan, and 99% are school teachers. So not university professors, because when you look at the list of international guests, most of them are from universities, and here lots of teachers and 10 or 12 university professors. So it's huge in the teaching community, and now universities are looking at the schools and saying, what are you doing there? We have never heard about that. So that's another thing that we have to do probably as a promoter of lesson study, to work with universities as well. All right. I wish I had more time, and I know that you have a tight schedule and you have meetings and everything, so we will really have to finish our podcast pretty soon. But before we do that, maybe a few words from every one of you to the teachers of Kazakhstan. So use this opportunity to talk to them. They know you, they respect you, they read your work, and maybe you would wish something about their professional life, education, or lesson study. So this is the floor for this. And you all have your own camera to do that.
Should I?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I want to say the Kazakh teachers and then some people outside of education, they say if you finish kind of teacher education program, you are done. You are ready to teach. You just go to the classroom to teach. But teaching is like a life learning process, and you have to grow by teaching, because teaching can be learned by teaching, by watching other colleagues teaching, and then also reading researches. So these three is critical to grow. Japanese teachers often say, if you are 10-year experienced teachers, now you become a teacher. Until 10 years, you are still novice teacher. So
it's like a med student. They also spend like 10 years.
Yes.
Even when they are practicing already, they're still students.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Catherine?
Well, I wish that Kazakh teachers will have the same kind of enjoyment from lesson study that I've had from lesson study, that ideally it's a way of deepening your enjoyment of daily practice and the kind of intellectual enjoyment that you get from working with colleagues and working with students. And I think it really should contribute to people loving their work, finding it always challenging, feeling that there's still so much more to learn. And I hope that that will be true in Kazakhstan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would wish to Kazakh teachers that they enjoy collaborating and really working together on a lesson, preparing, teaching, observing, discussing about it, because it's the heart of the teacher's profession. This lesson is a basic unit of our profession. So collaborate around that is a lot of learning, professional learning, but it's also a lot of joy. And you were talking about so many Kazakh teachers coming to the conference and so little of other countries. And I will return the question, why so little teachers of other countries? So I hope also that Kazakh teacher will be an example for teachers of other countries to come to this type of conference, to meet other teachers, to meet teacher educators, to meet researchers, because we have to work together. And that's something lesson study brings. It's not only going to other countries, it's not only working with other teachers, it's working hand in hand with researchers, with textbook authors, with school authorities. And I hope for that this conference will be an example also for the rest of the world.
Yes, we'll see. Good luck to all of us with the conference. All right, so I have no words how I am thankful to all of you for coming here and talking to me and to our audience. And I'm pretty sure that our teachers will have a lot of questions that they will ask in comments on our YouTube channel. So please do so. We'll try to answer the questions. So thank you so very much. And I wish you a really good conference. And of course, I hope you will enjoy Kazakhstan, because we really want you to feel like home, because Kazakh people are very hospitable, and for